Story 1, Made of the Mist at Niagara Falls. Everything else is overpriced, but that boat ride is the best deal in town. Story 2, Alcatraz. I lived in the Bay Area for a while and, despite visiting the area for work for weeks at a time, I never toured the island. I finally gave it a try and do not know why I waited. It is genuinely interesting, visually striking, and has great views. 10 out of 10 tourist trap. Story 3. The little penguins on Phillip Island in Victoria, Australia, draw bleachers full of people who watch them return to their roosts and nests at dusk every evening. It was amazing to see the first few arrive, then more and more. We stayed until almost everyone had left, then wandered along the boardwalk, watching them roost and talking with the staff until they asked us to leave. Story 4. Moraine Lake in Banff National Park. It is very difficult to reach these days, but photographs do not do it justice. The color of the water is incredible. Story 5. I don't know if it's a trap per se, but I always take the hop-on, hop-off buses whenever I go somewhere new. They let me briefly see different attractions so I can later revisit the more interesting ones at my leisure. Story 6. I really enjoyed my trip to the Guinness factory in Dublin, even though it was an obvious tourist trap. Story 7, Hobbiton. I first went during the COVID-19 pandemic when the borders were closed and they were struggling for revenue. I wanted to spend money and help New Zealand businesses, so I joined a tour. It was surprisingly good. I have been twice since, when there were much larger crowds, and it was still worth it. They manage everything very well and it all runs on a schedule. You wander around the hobbit holes and guides stop you to tell stories about the filming and the set build. Eventually you make your way down to the Green Dragon Inn, where you receive a free drink and have a little time to sit on the lawn and look out over the set. Recently they also built 2 hobbit holes, so groups are split in half and each half explores the interior of one of the houses. I discovered this update on my 3rd trip. It adds a big boost to what was already a great outing. Well worth the money if you ever visit New Zealand, even if you are not a fan of The Lord of the Rings. Story 8. I live in San Diego. Some of our tourist traps are the zoo and Birch Aquarium. They are world-class facilities and among the best places to visit. They are completely worth it. If you are at all fascinated by the research and conservation side of things, and I hope you are if you are going to a zoo or aquarium, you will find passionate people deeply committed to the welfare and stewardship of life. Story 9. I love towers. Space Needle, CN Tower, the Wynn and the Stratosphere in Las Vegas, the Empire State Building, and Willis Tower. They can be overpriced for the experience of going up in an elevator or eating at the restaurants at the top, but each has been worth the view. Story 10. I'm not a jewelry guy, but 50 years ago I saw the British Crown Jewels. Because of the time of day, I came upon the Colosseum without people or traffic, and I was charmed. If you ever get the chance to walk across the Golden Gate Bridge, take it. Bring a jacket. Pray for beautiful weather, but be prepared to be stunned no matter the weather. Muir Woods and Yosemite. Story 11. The House on the Rock is a house built into a hill in southwest Wisconsin. You spend the first third of the trip thinking, what the fuck? Why would anyone make this? Then it keeps going and becomes full-on madness. Story 12. The Vatican museums, and basically anything in Rome. I am not Catholic or even very religious. Story 13. The Robot Restaurant in Tokyo. Buy tickets online to get a reduced price and do not eat there because it is overpriced and, I assume, terrible. The show is so beautifully ridiculous and over the top. I did not regret any yen I spent there. Story 14. Faneuil Hall in Boston is mostly food stalls and shopping kiosks. The seafood mac and cheese at Mac and Cheese is so good that we take all our out-of-town guests there. It is a total tourist trap, and I am happy to pay $17 for mac and cheese every time. Our guests ask to eat there again when they return. Story 15. In this thread, people who have no idea what a tourist trap is. From Google Summary, a tourist trap is a place such as a restaurant, shop, or attraction that is designed to attract tourists and profit from them by overcharging for services, souvenirs, or entertainment. These places are often characterized by high prices, a lack of cultural authenticity, and a focus on a large volume of tourist traffic rather than genuine quality. It is the kind of place where you have to pay too much to get in and still exit through the gift shop. National parks are not tourist traps. Neither is the Smithsonian, which does not even charge admission. Story 16. One more stop. The Khan el-Khalili Souk in Cairo, Egypt. Sure, you came to see the pyramids, but what will you take back? From pointed slippers to Dead Sea Tupperware, the world's oldest tourist market has something for you. You can get a bargain if you can haggle. Story 17. Sedona, Arizona. I totally bought into the hype about the spiritual vortices and the Native American beaded jewelry stalls. Everywhere I looked, it was gorgeous. Story 18. The eastern section of Route 66 in northern Arizona includes Williams, Winslow, Flagstaff, the Painted Desert, the Petrified Forest, Meteor Crater, Sunset Crater, one of my favorite places on the planet, and all of the kitschy Americana attractions that go along with it. Story 19. The gaudy houses in Barcelona, Casa Mila and Casa Batlló. They are a bit expensive and very busy, and you exit through the gift shop, but they are well worth it. Story 20. Pike Place Market in Seattle. I lived in the city for a few years and still visit occasionally because there are great restaurants and you can find excellent produce and crafts. Story 21. Stonehenge is vast. Away from the stones and the visitor center, there is much history to explore, and it is set in stunning countryside. Avebury is even more impressive. Story 22. The Eiffel Tower. A Parisian sunset, the twinkling lights, and a glass of champagne at the top were a highlight of the trip. Story 23. The Pantheon in Rome is over 2,000 years old and still magnificent. Story 24. Clark's Trading Post. Fun spot. Gatorland. Salem Witch Museum. Story 25. The Star Wars area of Disneyland is absolutely amazing. Rise of the Resistance is the most incredible attraction. It is really more of an experience than a ride and far exceeded my expectations. Story 26. Pike Place Market in Seattle. Just because it's mobbed with tourists and has the first Starbucks doesn't mean you should stay away. Get some cheese curds at Beecher's, grab pastries from any of the bakeries, visit a record store, and have a beer while looking out on the water. Story 27. Kyoto during cherry blossom season. About 10 years ago. People were everywhere but friendly and not overwhelming. It was so beautiful. Story 28. The Grand Canyon. I know, cliché, but pictures do not do justice to how enormous it is. Standing there, you realize its true scale. It was crowded, but worth every second of the drive. Story 29. There are so many places to visit. I was in New Zealand and felt I had to visit the Shire. It was delightful and exactly what I wanted. I was also in Egypt a few weeks ago. You can see the pyramids from all over Cairo, but it was worth paying to get up close. Santorini is picturesque and a major tourist attraction. It is worth seeing in person. Story 30. Disney World. I wanted to hate it, but it made my children incredibly happy and was the most efficient, well-run place I have ever been. Most theme parks, amusement parks, and children's attractions leave me feeling ripped off and stuck with unhappy children who were tired and did not get what they hoped for. Story 31. I visited Anne Frank's house in the off-season, so there was no wait. It was humbling, moving, and inspiring. I can understand why people who wait in line for hours in the summer are disappointed. Story 32. People fundamentally do not understand what a tourist trap is. Mount Rushmore was built with the sole purpose of being a tourist attraction. Venice is a functioning, ancient city. Story 33. My wife and I started our trip to Spain with a crazy 36 hours in Ibiza. It was utterly trashy, crowded with British tourists, and overpriced, but ultimately we had a lot of fun. Story 34. Casa Bonita was as fun as I had hoped. I would have gladly stayed for hours if I had not been there with coworkers during a business trip. Story 35. I was impressed by the Art Institute of Chicago and the Museum of Science and Industry. I had no idea that the Smithsonian museums consist of multiple buildings and cannot be properly appreciated in a single day. Honorable mention to the Biltmore Estate. It is remarkable for its time period. Story 36. The Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream Factory near Stowe, Vermont, offers free samples, and it is amazing to watch how it is made. Story 37. I don't know if this counts, but seeing Pompeii is definitely worth it. It is unbelievably amazing to see things so old preserved so well. It is very crowded and touristy toward the front, but if you walk a few miles into it, it really thins out. There were times when my girlfriend and I were walking around completely alone. Story 38. Fudge from Uranus. Interstate 44, St. Robert, Missouri, United States of America. It is a real place and exactly what you would expect, a dad joke incarnate. Story 39. AskReddit, Riviera Maya. I was in Mexico for 10 days and stayed in the Yucatan, so it was nice to see the various cultural dances from around the country. Story 40. I went to Land's End on a gorgeous summer day with my parents a few years ago. Beautiful views, but so many overpriced things. I am glad I went, though. I am one of those people who likes to say I have done touristy things like walking across the bridge from the United States to Canada at Niagara and stepping back and forth over the border several times, as well as standing with one leg in each country laughing out loud. Sometimes stupid fun is the best fun. Story 41. The Smithsonian Museums, all of them. So much knowledge and history right in front of you, free of charge. I'm amazed by everything available to anyone who can get to Washington, D.C. and nearby areas. Edited to add. People are calling me out for misusing the term tourist trap. The food trucks are expensive. Fine, I concede, but everyone should still go when the government is not shut down. Story 42. Pearl Harbor and specifically the battleship Missouri are mind-blowing. The size and weight of everything and how cramped the living quarters are is astonishing. I stood in the spot where the Japanese surrendered. Then I visited the aircraft hangar with bullet holes still unrepaired. 10 out of 10. Absolutely recommend. Story 43. We almost did not go to Blarney Castle because I was told it was a tourist trap, but we had a lovely time. Story 44. At the catacombs in Paris, the line was so long it started to loop back on itself. It was astonishing to see all the bones. Story 45. The Biltmore House in Asheville, North Carolina, is amazing. The city is beautiful. Story 46. The London Eye is worth visiting at least once. You get some very nice views of London. Story 47. Obviously, you need to define what a tourist trap is, because most respondents don't have a clue. There is a difference between the world's largest ball of string and the Metropolitan Museum of Natural History. Story 48. Penguin Parade on Phillip Island. If you have made the effort to travel to Melbourne, make an afternoon or evening of it. Story 49. I enjoyed Universal Studios in Orlando. I took my son when he was a junior in high school. We waited in lines, ate lunch at Diagon Alley, and visited the wand shop. We went to Orlando because I attended a conference there. I would go again to the one in California. Story 50. Ruby Falls in Chattanooga, Tennessee is a popular tourist attraction advertised across the state. The site was developed in the 1920s or 1930s after a cave was discovered and commercialized. It is full of kitsch, but the cave, especially the waterfall chamber at the end, is spectacular despite the cheesy music and lighting. Story 51. I am not sure if it is considered a tourist trap, but the Guinness Storehouse in Dublin was fantastic. I loved it. Story 52. Malahat Skywalk is an expensive visit, but the whole experience and the slide down make it worth every penny. Story 53. Nyhavn is the harbor with colorful houses in Copenhagen. The restaurants along the waterfront are mostly overpriced tourist traps, and it gets very busy in the high season. Still, it is a beautiful historic area, and the view from the less crowded side is amazing. Go early in the morning to avoid the crowds and choose a different place to eat. It is definitely a must-see. Story 54. Amsterdam and Frank House. I had read the book many times, but visiting the actual house revealed the terrible conditions in which Anne and her family lived. I believe I began crying about halfway through the guided tour. Story 55. Being from southern Sweden, I had to see the Vasa ship in Stockholm. It was incredible to see such a majestic ship, even though it sank on its maiden voyage. Because the Baltic Sea is mostly brackish and not very salty, the ship has been preserved almost as it was back then. Apart from some minor repairs and the loss of the original color, the visit was totally worth it. Story 56. Underground tours in Seattle were fascinating. I had noticed many of the features before without knowing what they were, and I learned a great deal about the city's early days, which were quite rough. People once had to climb tall ladders to cross the streets because the roads were extremely steep. Story 57. Dunn's River Falls in Jamaica is a tourist trap, but it is a truly amazing experience to climb. Story 58. The Canadian Rocky Mountains, including Banff and Lake Louise. Story 59. Mount Rushmore was beautiful and interesting when we visited on Memorial Day. We walked the trail and enjoyed different views of the presidents. Seeing it from afar was equally impressive. Story 60. In this thread, legitimate attractions that are really good. Mine is Rock City in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It is actually pretty neat. Story 61. Michelangelo's David. I did not care to see it. I had seen pictures and the line was long, but my friend dragged me there. When we finally got in and I saw that piece of carved rock, I had never seen a taller man in my life. I was in awe at how much it looked like a man standing there, but it was a piece of rock. Story 62. San Francisco had everything I wanted, so I moved here. Story 63. Maybe it's because I have not traveled much, but visiting the Tokyo Skytree was incredible. Besides the service and hospitality, simply being that high was mind-blowing. Story 64. Lake Louise, Alberta. The most beautiful place I have ever seen. Story 65. Empire State Building. I had wanted to go to New York City for years and did when I was in my early 20s. The first step out onto the deck in the evening, with the Twin Towers in the near distance, was just mind-blowing. I have been back since, and their absence does not reduce the spectacle. As a young kid from Australia, I had pictured them as the epitome of the New York skyline. Story 66. The Appleton Rum Distillery tour in Jamaica was fascinating. At the end, they laid out a bottle of each of their rums, a pile of glasses, and invited us to sample as many as we liked. Nobody on the coach back to the hotel was even close to sober. Story 67. The Great Wall of China is a tourist spot north of Beijing. If you take the time to walk an hour or so past the reconstructed section with the cable car, it gradually becomes increasingly authentic. The crowds are large, but keep walking and you will be one of the few people on that section of the wall. It is truly breathtaking. Story 68. The tour of Neuschwanstein Castle in Germany is especially remarkable. The backstory of the place is wild. Story 69. The Augustiner Biergarten in Munich is a great place. The beer and the food are very nice, and in summer it is especially pleasant to hang out. Story 70. I visited Niagara Falls, specifically the Maid of the Mist boat ride. I went with the kids because that is what you do when you are there. It was absolutely amazing and surreal to see all that water coming down. I highly recommend it. Story 71. Canadian National Tower in Toronto. Book a restaurant reservation and get free access to the observation deck. The Toronto Islands and ferry ride are nice as well. We used to have Ontario Place and the Science Centre, but the museum and the Art Gallery of Ontario are worth a look. Story 72. Times Square is crowded, but it really captures the energy of New York City. Story 73. Mystery spots. There's one in Santa Cruz, California, one in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and probably others. I love the silly carnival sideshow and magic show aspect of them. They run the same nonsense story about a gravitational anomaly, but it is usually just a cabin built at a slant that you are not supposed to notice once inside, or it helps create the optical illusions. I don't care, I'm in. I also like the Winchester Mystery House. Story 74. The Tower of London. Take a guided tour with a beefeater, and the history they share will put Game of Thrones to shame. It is all true. Story 75. On my way to Shenandoah a few years ago, I stopped for lunch near Luray Caverns. I took a chance on it and was not disappointed. It was a lot of fun. Story 76. I went into Graceland rolling my eyes. I came out an Elvis fan. I was a little drunk, so that may have contributed. Story 77. The Pyramids of Giza. If you can go. Story 78. I took the tour of the United States ship Arizona at Pearl Harbor. As an American, I find my country's involvement in World War II immensely frustrating, so I was skeptical about the tour. However, I heard repeatedly that the tour is worth doing, and it was. Story 79. I love going to Pike Place Market, exploring, and doing all the touristy things in Seattle as a local except the Space Needle. You are not getting up there. Story 80. I once dismissed the Guinness Storehouse in Dublin as tourist muck, but when a friend from the United States visited a few years ago, we had a surprisingly enjoyable afternoon. Story 81. Probably the Eiffel Tower. It is crowded and very touristy, but once you are up there and see the view, you understand why everyone goes. It is worth it. Story 82. The Bayeux Tapestry amazed me. I expected nothing on my first visit but left overwhelmed. Story 83. I go to Manhattan to play Pokemon Go, and when I actually stop looking at my phone, Central Park often surprises me with its beauty. Story 84. Chichen Itza. Took forever to get there, and it was hotter than hell, but it was amazing. This was back when climbing the main pyramid was allowed. With a knowledgeable guide, you learn a lot of history. There is much to see, and much of it is intact. Tulum is also excellent, and we had an incredible guide. Story 85. I enjoyed the Cabinet War Rooms off Whitehall in London. I had lived in London for 30 years before going there and was glad I had made the effort. Story 86. Café du Monde in New Orleans is a massive tourist trap, but the beignets are great. Story 87. The Thing in Arizona is one of the remaining roadside tourist traps from the mid-20th century and is awesome. Story 88. I must say I have never had a bad time at Disneyland. It was surprisingly affordable, especially compared with my local theme park, which is not in the same league. Riding the roller coasters while the fireworks were starting was amazing. I have only been to Universal Studios Orlando once, and I was very impressed. Story 89. Blarney Castle. The rock that you are supposed to kiss is the least interesting part of the place. The rest of the grounds and gardens are fantastic. Story 90. I visited the Trees of Mystery near Klamath, California, in the Redwoods. The fiberglass Paul Bunyan and Babe always put me off. I saw an Instagram post about the canopy walk and was intrigued. I loved every moment and would live in the canopy if they would let me. Story 91. Most of them are known for that. Go check them all out. Story 92. Viewing the Northern Lights in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, Canada. Story 93. South of the border is worth stopping at and wandering around for a restroom break. Just don't spend money on anything unnecessary. Story 94. The Salem Witch Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. I went on a school trip when I was 11 and found it fascinating. I took my wife there 50 years later and it was almost exactly the same. It was great, cheesy fun. Story 95. Pike Place Market is iconic, and as a local I can say it really showcases some of Seattle's best vendors. The fish, the flowers, the handmade goods, and the food. Oh, the food! I'll brave any crowd at the market just to spend time there. The relatively new pavilion expansion that leads down to the freshly unveiled pier and waterfront is breathtaking, especially on a clear day. I always bring out-of-town visitors and love buying gifts at the market. It's a special place, and I haven't experienced anything else like it in my travels. Vendors really look out for each other. Many have been there for decades, and it has a real family vibe. It's extra fun to see them interact. Fun fact, the bronze pigs in the market are actual piggy banks. The money collected goes into a vendor fund used to help vendors who are going through a difficult time and need assistance. This fund was critical at the height of coronavirus disease 2019. Story 96. Niagara Falls. I grew up nearby on the United States side. The Canadian side is much more developed with more and better attractions, but I prefer the state park on that side. The Maid of the Mist boat ride is always a good time. I have been going since I was a little child and am still happy to make the pilgrimage in my 40s. The power of the water is breathtaking. Story 97. I love silly roadside attractions like the Mystery Spot. Story 98. Iguazu Falls in Argentina was overwhelmingly busy, but it was breathtaking. If I asked someone to draw heaven on earth and they drew Iguazu Falls, I would say, okay, maybe take it down a notch. Story 99. Visit Venice in November. The trip was wonderful. The weather was fantastic, and the crowds were light. It is a beautiful and iconic city. Story 100. Luray Caverns in Virginia. There are many billboards on Interstate 95, so we were hesitant to stop, but it was great. Story 101. Pompeii is overrun with tourists. It is incredible anyway. Story 102. Colosseum. It is crowded and hot, but really awe-inspiring and interesting to imagine being built and in use 2,000 years ago. If you can get attic tickets, you get the most unique view and experience away from the crowds. Totally worth it to me. Story 103. Gatlinburg, Tennessee. I'm biased because that was my honeymoon, but renting a cabin on a mountainside for my second marriage and wandering around a tourist trap suits a pair of 40-somethings. Story 104. Fremont Street in Las Vegas was a pretty cool idea by the electrical and architectural engineers, but it is now filled with street performers with disabilities. It is kind of sad. Story 105. Navy Pier in Chicago is scorned by some locals, but it really is worth a visit. Story 106. Salem in October is something everyone warns against. Story 107. None of you know what a tourist trap is. Laughing out loud. I thought Wall Drug and the Corn Palace were hilariously awesome. Those are traps and worth the stop. Story 108. I arrived at Blue Lagoon Spa before dawn when it opened, and it was magical. Story 109. My ex lived in South Dakota, and we were going to spend a weekend at her parents'. The next weekend we would be at mine in Colorado Springs. On the way out of South Dakota, I happened to look to my right and saw Mount Rushmore. I had never been and had no real desire to see it until I was passing by. I decided to drive us there even though my ex did not want to go. I thought it was cool, but she disagreed, and we left after a short time because there was not much to do there. We passed the Crazy Horse Memorial, and I was in awe, but she refused before I asked. We could not afford to lose more time, so I was not going to go anyway. In Colorado Springs, she wanted to go to Pikes Peak and the Garden of the Gods. It was my turn to avoid tourist traps. I was fine with the Garden of the Gods because it is off the main road, but I did not want to go to Pikes Peak. I took her anyway. The clouds always move in when I go up there, and it happened again. I felt lightheaded, standing in fog and looking over a cliff into more fog. She was still in awe and kept staring at Pikes Peak whenever she was outside. We found it interesting that we both react that way to big things. Her focus is on nature, and mine is on man-made structures. I need to see more large statues. Story 110. I was just in Tombstone, Arizona, and had an absolutely fantastic time. Story 111. The House on the Rock is full of many weird and wonderful things. Fuck Neil Gaiman, though. Every good thing is tainted now. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.